Subscribe for all stories dangerous, weird, or altogether unexplainable. Have a weird or scary true story? Leave in the comments section for a chance to be in a video. I was working on a car carrier 4 years ago in the Middle East. Our typical route went through Byron waters at times, and so we always picked up 4 ex-Marines as security in Aqaba, Jordan before we went. One night while we were going through Byron waters off of Yemen, we started to have problems with the main engine. So we stopped and had to drift for a bit to figure out what the problem was. During this time I was working on the stern back end of the vessel. I couldn't really see anything out in the ocean. Everything was dimly lit on the ship. I don't know why, but I got bored and turned on the spotlight, and there he was. This guy with a gun in a rusted little boat staring at me about 15 feet from the ship. I just stared back at him, kind of stunned. I was afraid if I reached for the radio to call one of the Marines, he'd shoot me. The Marines had weapons. So he looked at me and I looked at him, and he sort of gave me a nod as if he was telling me well played, and I gave him one back. Then he slowly rowed his boat back off into the deep pitch black night. I didn't know how many others there were, but I did call it in on the radio as soon as I lost sight of him. I still remember his face today, that deep, stern, concentrated look. A 16-year-old kid at 50 feet, face down, dead. He breathed down his tank looking for his 17-year-old buddy, after they got separated. Other kid died too. Bad day on that beach. Coast Guard in a dive boat pulled them both out in front of about 30 families and kids enjoying the nice weather. Well, it's not the ocean, but apparently this also happens in the sea. My friend's brother works as firefighter in Korea, but he used to work as diving instructor, near into his college years. One of the jobs he took was diver, as in someone who dives to retrieve the bodies of drowned people. While he didn't get a lot of cases, I remember him telling me this one story about his experience. On this particular day, he was diving in a river after it flooded due to typhoon. They had report of a drowned person, and they were searching for the body. After an hour of searching, his colleague informed that he found a body, and few divers went to retrieve it. The water was murky, but you could still make out figures in the water. When the divers were close to retrieving the body, the search party leader told everyone to surface. Back on the ship, he explained that this body shouldn't be touched because unlike normal bodies that float on water, this one was standing in the middle of water. Apparently, in Asian cultures, Grim Reapers can't cross over water, so people who drown must replace their spot with another person in order to pass on to afterlife, and the standing corpses are the ones that are looking for people to replace their spots. Also, these spots with standing corpses are more likely to have underwater whirlpools or currents that can trap people easily. They marked the spot and checked it every day, and retrieved the body after 3 days when it floated on top of the water. We are treasure divers from Key West, and we were out fishing late night, early morning. Everyone that has spent time on the water knows the witching hour on the sea is about 2:am to 5:30. It was about 5:am, and with the sun coming up, and the water gin clear, we could see our chumming was bringing some interesting critters to the surface. Some big sharks cruised by, and different things too, but suddenly one of the guys screamed out, "Look at the size of this manta ray on the port side." At the same time, another guy said, "Wait, I can see him on starboard side too, and he is wider than the boat." He was too, over 18 to 20 feet wide, and he lazily cruised under us and circled back again and again. The sea has many secrets, and she hasn't given up many of them despite what people and scientists claim. We know more about the moon than we do the deepest oceans in our seas. Recently a friend told me she met people in the Southwest that claim extraterrestrials live in the deep ocean and have been there for a long time. They claim they're safe there because humans can't live and survive in the deepest oceans. The context: on a 41-foot sailboat in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, with about 7 other men, doing a shakedown/test cruise, planned to be out for about 12 hours. Mid-1980s, not as reliable weather prediction resources. We get caught in a tropical storm, winds gusting into the 50 miles per hour range, just this short of a weak hurricane. We had just barely rigged storm hawsers and storm sails because of one fellow on board who was the best sailor since the storm was almost on us, otherwise we would have died. During the storm itself, I expected to die at any time. In fact, we made a securite call on the radio. If you have time at sea, you know what I'm talking about. If not, it's not that important. For what seemed like 15 minutes, we were in a maelstrom, no visibility, but then it passed. We would live. This was at about 3 p.m., and although there was cloud cover of course, the ambient light was such that you could see 2 miles or so in any direction. If you're familiar with the sea, you know that such storms, particularly in shallower depths near land masses, dredge a lot of things on the sea floor. The sighting. We're all on deck, working lines, checking damage, etc. And the bay around us is choppy and churning and foaming. Old-timey sailors often use the saying the sea is confused. I look about 15 feet of the starboard side and something swims to the surface, breaks the surface, looks at us, then submerges again. It was like a thin man, with humanoid shape, arms articulated like a man, a human head, but its skin was covered in scales like a snake. It looked at us, blinked its weird, heavy-lidded eyes, then dove back under. So maybe you need to know a few things about me at that moment. No drugs, no alcohol, no injuries. I was elated because I was glad to be alive, but my senses in that situation were sharpened, not dulled. I had, at that time, about 6 years experience on ships and fishing boats, and had seen squid, octopi, flying fish, sharks, skates, etc., all around the world. I was not the type of guy to see a patch of seaweed and call it a sea monster. I made an instant decision that I was not going to say anything. What could I say? I just saw a strange creature, take my word for it. The men on this boat were all mechanics and engineers and professionals. Why get a reputation as a flake? At the time it was important for each of us to get D skipper or LUD qualifications, and saying something like that would be frowned upon. And as I stood there in my life vest, soaking wet, hooked onto the steel lifeline, glad to be alive, one of the other sailors, a USN Captain J_S_, with over 30 years experience in the surface navy, piped up and said, "I just saw a brown thing pop up on the surface. It looked like a lizard man, with a scary face. It blinked at us with these big eyes and then went back under." "Yeah, I saw it too," I said. No one else said that they had seen it. Then we sailed back to the pier later that day and didn't speak of it again. Coda: A. Everything I've written above is the truth. B. This is the internet. For all you know, I may be a dog, a brain floating in a jar making up stories, or a landlubber who's never even been to the beach. C. No, I don't have pictures, and if I did, would people say they were faked? D. I am well aware that a momentary glimpse of something on the surface of the sea is notoriously unreliable, and the mind and eye and the imagination play tricks on people, even in the best of times. E. If you have read all of this, thank for your time and for the invitation to share my experience. I worked on the flight deck of a carrier for 3 years, 2 deployments to Arabian Sea, also transited the Suez, felt the call of the void as even heard it called, would be smoking on a weather deck watching the sea speedy by, leaning against the railings. Sometimes the thought of jumping over would materialize in my mind. For the briefest second it's almost comforting, like a faint magnetism to just do it, then it's gone. It never even disturbed me, so much has baffled me. Also, the ocean is alien. It's unbelievably vast, deep and barren, on the surface anyways. I would often ponder what was going on below us, and obviously fantasize about deep-sea monsters, ghost ships, creepy paranormal stuff. The vast size always unnerved me. It's just something you have to experience. Being hundreds of miles from land. It's crazy. The call is real. I stood so much lookout, and that water just becomes so tempting. It's not really a desire to end it all. It's just a desire to go into the water. This deep, refreshing, unending hue. Not me, and mostly a folk story, but creepy nonetheless. I asked an old fisherman in a beach in Malaysia the same thing you're asking here. He said there are female spirits in the sea, who are basically neutral towards humans, we shouldn't be messing with them anyway. One day, a boat sank, and divers were sent to recover bodies. 2 of them were searching the seabed. Suddenly one guy feels a tug on his arm, and it's his buddy frantically pointing at the bed. There, A beautifully dressed Malay woman was knelt, holding a corpse like an offering to the divers. Both divers fled for their lives, and gave up the search. Apparently the woman was one of those spirits. Scary. I think I was 8, my mother and sister were fishing off the dock. I was a couple of 100 yards south next to the water leaning against a tree. I opened a fish bait bottle and it spilled. As I'm picking them up, right next to me in the water, a fucking man's head just rises out of the water, green and pale. It looked at me and slowly sank back into the water. I began crying and never saw the head come back up. It was not wearing any kind of rebreather. My sister ran over to me and asked me what happened. I'm 14 now, and every time I try to describe or explain this story, they never believe me and say I was dreaming. I can still remember that fucking face, but I wasn't scared the first time I saw it. I was purely shocked. But that face was terrifying, like 1990s Pennywise terrifying. These days I try and play it off as something paranormal, or spiritual, but if that was some sort of living creature, then this world is a scary place. I'm in for more details if you would be comfortable. I guess more description? That's wild though. I'm 21 and in college and class starts tomorrow and I'm probably not going to sleep well now. What else to say? It was alive and it turned and looked at me. The hair was maybe dirty or matted, but also it smelled almost like sulfur or something rotting. I smelled it shortly after. Scared the shit out of me though. I have been racing ships for a while. There was a guy in our ship that was doing the night shift. He was there for a lot of time because nobody wanted to wake up. He looked at the compass for so many hours that he said that the directions of the compass started to convert into demons and tried to convince him into jumping into the sea. There is something really creepy about nighttime. Nobody will openly speak about it unless they are drunk, but a lot of people, including me, had almost jumped into the sea at night. Even if you know that you will 100% die, you just want to jump into the sea. There is something that pushes you to jump. My father worked on a cruise ship as an engineer. During one of the longer trips, 6 of the dining crew just disappeared overnight. None of the night crew saw them and none of their personal belongings were moved. Freaked my dad out so bad he quit. When I was 13 in 2003, me, my friend and his dad took his boat out to fish. First day was great, so much fun. Next day we woke up, started fishing, and about 20 feet out a massive fin came out of the water. My aunt Yuxi is going crazy telling this. The dad said it was a whale playing around and that was its fin. That made sense because we were watching whales as we fished. It wasn't a whale but a gigantic great white shark. The fin was, I want to say, 6-8 feet out of the water. My friend's daddy yells, "We're leaving. Don't worry about the rods, we're leaving fucking now." My friend was confused, but as his dad turned his boat we saw blood. A lot of it, and a whale that was pretty bug being munched on. The shark had to be at least 40+ feet in length. The whale was hardly bigger than it. I've seen plenty of great whites, big ones, but this one was so big I thought it was a megalodon. To this day I believe that. I wish I had a camera or some way to take a picture. The entire 7-hour boat ride home my friend's dad kept looking behind him, checking radar, and was just in pure panic. He sold his boat and hasn't gone fishing past the pier since that day. He tells the story and everyone laughs at him and called him a liar, but me and your son confirmed it because we saw it too. Writing this entire thing has given me a mini anxiety attack just remembering that day. A few years back my friend's boat was hit by a rogue wave and almost everyone on board was lost at sea, including one of my best childhood friends. Fucked me up pretty good, made me question my own life and relationship to risk, mortality, etc. Fast forward some years later, I was sitting out on a random bluff looking out at the Pacific in the general direction of the accident, thinking my thoughts, when an older man walked up. I was in a pretty secluded spot and was generally trying to put out the vibe I just wanted to be left alone, but he just launched into how he found a body down on the beach below us a few years back and how difficult it was getting the boat in there, etc. He asked me when I was leaving again and I told him I was done with rolling the dice and planned to chill. He chuckled and said I just didn't know it yet and that I was similar to him and that we had to roam, wonder, explore and push our limits. I tried to call his bluff and asked where he was going next, and he immediately with all seriousness replied he was going to sail Indonesia on a DIY raft, canoe. We ended up chatting for maybe an hour about all sorts of shit, but most just an older man mentoring an obviously depressed younger man. I never mentioned the accident, but it felt like he was speaking directly to the entire conversation. We had been to some of the same places in the Himalaya and generally connected in uncanny ways. One thing in common thing is a coincidence, but at what point is it not? When he got up to leave, he said something about how this was probably one of the strangest conversations of my life and walked away.